Speaker, I call the Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Coming from Canterbury, like many from this Parliament, I know that New Zealand has a lot of challenges ahead of us. Well, Mr. Speaker, to meet those challenges, not just in Canterbury as a region, but New Zealand as a nation, we need a government with a plan. We need a government with courage. We need a government that gives our citizens leadership and vision, a government that is prepared to take bold initiatives to get New Zealand back on its feet. Well, we haven't got that government, but roll on the end of November and we have a chance to change the government. National has no plan, it has no leadership and it has no vision. It is letting down New Zealanders. It is wasting the opportunity that we have to be better as a nation. We need coherent and courageous policies from our government. But what are we getting? The great leap back to the late 80s and 90s, asset sales. It really beggars belief that the National Party would think that the failed policies that have people like Sir Roger Douglas and Don Brash salivating at would be reintroduced back into this Parliament. I really thought that we had moved on from those tired, old, failed policies, but that's what we're getting from National. And of course they're dressing it up with their poll-driven slogans. Well, I tell you, Mr. Speaker, that those slogans are just not working with New Zealanders, and Stephen Joyce and Bill English and Tony Ryle know that they're not working because they read more polls than just about anyone else in the country. We know that the mums and dads that Stephen Joyce and Bill English and Tony Ryle talk about already own the power companies that party, National, wants to sell back to them. We don't want to buy something that we already own. We don't want our power companies, our lakes and our dams to be bought by overseas companies. We want those assets, our power companies, our lakes and our dams, to stay in our ownership. And Mr. Speaker, the other thing that I think is hugely frustrating is the dishonesty of the government. They are not being honest about privatisation. Treasury released their budget advice, which the government will have received, may not have read, but will have received. And they said, and I want to quote, Mr. Speaker, from that advice from Treasury, significant participation by foreign investments will be essential to achieve the government's overall objectives. So when we hear from the National Party the mantra that New Zealand mums and dads will buy our power companies, that is not true. By their own Treasury advice, they will need to sell them to overseas investors to make the money that they have put in their budgets for outgoing years. Last week, Bill English misled the House. He said that he had not received any advice from Treasury that said exactly those words that I've just quoted from the Treasury document. Bill English should have been down in this House at the next possible opportunity to apologise and withdraw and correct his statement because it was wrong. But he hasn't done that yet. But it's on the public record because it's Treasury's published advice. But we shouldn't be surprised by this dishonesty because it's exactly what we heard in 1999 when the then National Government said they're going to sell Contact Energy to mum and dad investors. But what happened was that Edison brought up 51% for nearly $1.7 million and made a huge profit on its original purchase. The majority shareholder in Contact Energy is not the mum and dad investors that National promised us in 1999 when they sold it off. The majority shareholder is Origin Energy, which is an Australian-based company. I don't mind overseas investment in New Zealand. In fact, I welcome it. But there are some strategic assets, some important parts of our infrastructure, Mr Speaker, that New Zealanders own currently, and they should remain in our ownership. They should not be put up for sale by the national